So next up, we've got a little bit of an interlude. I'm going to focus on one of my favorite parts or features of VS Code. It's something called Emmet. I'm going to do my best to spread out some of these tips and tricks for VS Code throughout the course where they make the most sense. Emmet is a tool that works, or it helps us write HTML, so I'm introducing it now. Okay, so what does Emmet do? Emmet is an extension. It's actually built into VS Code, but it's something for other editors that you can download that helps us very quickly write HTML markup where we don't have to type everything from scratch. We can use shortcuts. It does come bundled in with VS Code, so you don't have to install anything. And if you watch this demo on their website, we can actually see some pretty cool stuff. Something like this. This is quite complicated, and I don't know all of the syntax, but if you just run this, it will be expanded into a bunch of markup. So there is a lot of this syntax, this shortened syntax that you can use to create HTML elements quickly. There's a cheat sheet on the Emmet documentation. I'll show you a couple of examples. So if you wanted to make this structure right here, where we have a nav with a UL as a child and then an LI as a child of that UL, we use this right here, nav and then that greater than UL greater than LI, and then you hit tab. So this little piece of syntax makes a child element. So let's try it out. Why don't we make a new document or a new file here? I'll just call it Emmet demo.html. And let's use my little snippet there. This is actually from Emmet. You can see it tells me that. To get my basic structure, I'll change the title, Emmet demo. Okay. And then in here, why don't we try something like, let's say I want a main, and then I want a header inside of that, or maybe I want, how about a section with an H1 inside of that, and I'll hit tab. There we go. So that is the first little bit of Emmet syntax we've seen. You use that bracket there. Technically doing something like this is also coming from Emmet, just making an H1, but using that bracket is a nice little feature that makes child elements. Next up, we have the sibling plus sign. We can make two elements or more elements that are not nested, but they're siblings. So if I really quickly wanted, I don't know, what would we want here? How about an H1 and then an H2 after that, and then another H2? I could do this, and it makes them together. They're not nested. They are adjacent. They're siblings. We also have this thing called climb up. I'm going to ignore that for now, but it allows you to navigate. So you could make a div with a sibling of a div, and then a paragraph inside of that div, with a span inside of that paragraph, with an adjacent EM element. We have yet to discuss that. And then you can climb up to escape, sort of to go back to where you were and do a block quote. Anyway, you don't need to worry about that for now. This is, honestly, in my opinion, it's harder for me to remember all of the syntax. I most commonly use this, and this one over here, multiplication. So multiplication helps us make a bunch of things that are similar at once. If I needed to make a bunch of LIs inside of a UL, I could have my UL, and then inside I could have LI, and that will make a single one, or I can multiply it if I want 4 of them, just like that. So that's extremely useful, and I also find this numbering very useful. This one uses the $sign syntax, and it's going to create numbers for us, so it will add them dynamically in. So I could do something like, maybe I'll make a nav, and inside of this nav, we have a UL. Inside of that, there's a bunch of LIs. And then I want 5 of those LIs, so I'll multiply by 5. And inside of each one, we want an anchor tag. So let's see what we end up with there. Okay, hopefully no surprises. Nav, UL, 5 LIs, each with an anchor tag. I just undid that. But now if I use the $sign here, I could do something like, well, if I just type the $sign, you'll see what I end up with. Not really a valid element, but we end up with our numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I could use that somewhere. The syntax to set an attribute like href looks like this right here. Href equals, and I could put $sign there. And now we have href equals 1, 2, 3, 4. It's kind of odd to do that, but it's possible. We could do something like href equals www.$sign.com. And there we go, www.1.com, .2.com, .3. Maybe you won't need this right away, but it can be nice if you need those numbers. And once we talk about things like classes, you'll see that used here, class attribute. We have not discussed that. This is sometimes useful. So there's a lot you can do with these numbers, but that's all I'll show you for now. If you want to add text inside of something, a new element, you could do these curly braces. So you could do something like an anchor tag with click me inside. Well, that seems kind of easy to do. But what if you wanted something like, I want each one of these anchor tags to have something inside of it that says, I don't know, click me. Well, all I need is those curly braces, click me, and then expand that. And there we go. So this is what we end up with here. Click me is inside of each one of those anchor tags. Kind of a lot of syntax, and if you don't know what you're doing and you look at this, it's absolutely overwhelming. So what I think I'm going to do is actually write a comment so you can see what I expanded into that. And I'll do that for each of these. But definitely the most frequently used, at least for me, the most frequently used shortcuts are the, what is that, greater than bracket. So I can do, a UL with an LI inside. And then using the multiplication to make multiple elements. And then using the plus sign to make adjacent elements. Some of this stuff is nice, but you really have to, I at least have to work to remember it, and sometimes it's just not worth it. Okay, so that's Emmet. It has to do with HTML, but it's not part of HTML. It's just a nice little tool that comes with VS Code.